For generations, we looked at the map of our celestial neighborhood and saw finished work. We learned that 8 planets circled the sun in a predictable dance, with Neptune standing as the final sentinel at the edge of everything. It was a comfortable certainty, a complete architecture etched into every classroom wall and shared by every astronomer who mapped the outer dark. That map is wrong, not because we missed a small moon or failed to spot a stray asteroid, but because the very structure of our solar system is incomplete. We have spent years believing we lived in a house with 8 rooms, only to realize there is a door we haven't found yet. The evidence does not come from a photograph or a direct sighting, but from a subtle, ghostly pull acting on the farthest reaches of space. Far beyond the known borders, where the light of the sun begins to fail, objects are moving in ways that defy every law we applied to the old map. They are clustering together, leaning into the void as if guided by an invisible hand. This is not a minor correction or a rounding error in our calculations. It is a fundamental demolition of what we thought was certain. The geometry of the outer solar system suggests a hidden mass, a silent giant that has remained unseen while shaping the orbits of everything around it. We are now forced to accept that our neighborhood is larger, colder, and far more mysterious than the version we were taught. As we move away from the familiar warmth of the inner planets, the scale begins to shift. To find this ghost, we must leave the safety of the known and travel further into the dark than any human eye has ever seen. To grasp the scale of this missing piece, we must first measure the silence that precedes it. We begin at a single point of reference, the distance from our home to the center of everything. This is 1 astronomical unit, a span of roughly 149 million kilometers. It is the yardstick by which we weigh the void, the baseline for every journey we have ever charted into the dark. At this scale, the solar system feels manageable, a collection of bright spheres orbiting a dominant star in a predictable rhythm. But as we push outward, the distance begins to stretch and warp our intuition. We pass Mars, then the asteroid belt, moving further into the cold where the sunlight loses its strength. By the time we reach Jupiter and Saturn, we are dealing with multiples of that first unit, drifting through an emptiness that grows more oppressive with every million miles. Neptune marks the supposed boundary, standing as the final sentinel at 30 astronomical units. For a long time, this was the edge of our map, the place where the planets ended and the wilderness began. Beyond Neptune lies the Kuiper Belt, a vast frozen ring of debris and ancient ice that extends from 30 to approximately 50 astronomical units. If you were to travel there, you would find yourself in a graveyard of primordial objects, remnants of the system's birth that never quite found a place among the 8 great worlds. This region is not a solid wall, but a sparse cloud of frozen stones and gases stretching out for billions of miles into the velvet night. Imagine the sheer volume of this space. At 50 astronomical units, you are 50 times further from the sun than the Earth is. The warmth we take for granted on our pale blue dot is gone here, replaced by a cold so absolute it seems to vibrate in the silence. This belt was thought to be the final frontier of our neighborhood, a quiet periphery where objects drifted in random, lonely orbits, undisturbed and unremarkable. We looked at this region as a chaotic fringe, a place where gravity had long since given up its grip on order. The expectation was simple. These distant icy bodies should be scattered like grains of sand thrown across a dark floor, their paths determined by the fading influence of Neptune or the random collisions of eons past. There was no reason to suspect a hidden architecture here. We believed we were seeing the true end of the line. Yet, as our instruments grew more sensitive and our patience for observing the deep dark increased, the data began to shift. The objects at the furthest edges of this 50-unit boundary stopped behaving like random debris. They started to show a preference. Instead of being scattered in every direction, they were clustering together, their orbits leaning into the void with an eerie, coordinated precision. They were not drifting, they were aligning. The geometry of these distant worlds suggested that something was guiding them, a gravitational ghost acting on the Kuiper Belt from far beyond its outer rim. The map we had drawn, ending at 50 astronomical units, was missing the very thing that gave this region its shape. There was an anomaly waiting in the dark, a presence that refused to be seen, but could not help but leave its fingerprint on everything it touched. The silence of this place is not a void, but a weight. To move from the inner sanctuary of the solar system into the Kuiper Belt is to experience a gradual erasure of everything we define as home. In the warmth of the first astronomical unit, light is a tactile presence, something that touches your skin and defines the day. But as you drift further, the sun begins its long, slow retreat from being a source of life to becoming merely a geometric point in the distance. You can almost feel the thinning of the cosmic air, the way the gravitational tether of the sun stretches until it feels fragile, like a silver thread pulled nearly to its breaking point. By the time you cross the threshold of Neptune, the world is changed. The colors of our familiarity, the deep reds of Mars or the brilliant whites of Jupiter, fade into a monochromatic spectrum of charcoal and indigo. Everything here is stained by an eternal twilight, a place where the concept of a year ceases to be a cycle of seasons and becomes instead a slow, agonizing crawl through the dark. Imagine yourself floating in that outer ring, suspended between 30 and 50 astronomical units. Around you, the debris of the early universe drifts in a state of permanent suspension. These are not planets, but ghosts, frozen shards of nitrogen and methane, some no larger than a mountain, others as wide as cities. They move with a lethargy that defies human perception, gliding through a space so vast that two objects passing each other might take centuries to truly meet. There is a profound loneliness in this architecture. The Kuiper Belt is less of a belt and more of a shimmering, translucent veil draped over the edge of our world. It is a region defined by what it lacks. There is no wind, no weather, no sound but the internal humming of your own breath against the glass of a helmet. The cold here is not something you simply feel. It is an active force that seeks to crystallize every molecule, turning gas into stone and motion into stillness. For decades, we looked at this expanse through our telescopes and saw only a chaotic fringe. We believed the Kuiper Belt was the solar system's attic, a place where the leftover scraps of creation were tossed in random heaps, it left to drift without purpose or pattern. The expectation was that if you mapped 10,000 objects here, they would be distributed like dust motes in a beam of light, scattered by the whim of ancient collisions and the fading echoes of Neptune's gravity. But as we stared longer into that velvet night, the randomness began to dissolve. We noticed a strange coherence in the silence. The distant objects were not drifting aimlessly, they were leaning. They were tilting their orbits toward a single unseen coordinate in the deep dark, as if they were all bowing to an invisible king. It was a subtle betrayal of our map. Every piece of data we collected suggested that the geometry of the void was being sculpted by something massive, something cold, and something profoundly hidden. The objects at 50 astronomical units were no longer just debris. They had become markers. They were the breadcrumbs left behind by a gravitational giant that refused to step into the light, leaving us to wonder what manner of world could possibly hold such power over the furthest reaches of our home. Expectation, a random distribution of icy debris drifting through the outer dark. Reality, a spatial clustering of trans-Neptunian objects that defies every known law of our current map. When we look at the far reaches of the solar system, we expect to see chaos. We imagine these distant worlds as lonely wanderers, their paths skewed by ancient collisions or the fading memory of the sun's birth. If you were to throw a handful of pebbles across a frozen lake, They would land in a scattered, unpredictable pattern. That is how we viewed the objects beyond Neptune. We believed that once you passed the 50 astronomical unit mark, the gravitational grip of the known planets became too weak to enforce any real order. In this view, any object found in the deep void should be oriented in a random direction, its orbit pointing towards some arbitrary coordinate in the celestial sphere. But as we tracked more and more of these extreme trans-Neptunian objects, the randomness vanished. The data revealed something unsettling. These distant bodies were not scattered, they were grouping together. It was as if an invisible hand had reached into the void and nudged them all in the same direction. Instead of being spread evenly across the sky, their orbits were leaning toward a specific region of space with a coordinated precision that felt intentional. This spatial clustering is not a fluke of observation or a trick of the light. It is a physical alignment. These objects are moving in harmony, their paths tilted and shifted as if they are all dancing to the rhythm of a partner we cannot see. The most disturbing part of this discovery is that Neptune cannot be the cause. For years, we looked to the blue giant as the sole shepherd of the outer system, the dominant force capable of sculpting the orbits of everything around it. But these objects are too far away. They drift in regions where Neptune's gravity is a mere whisper, far too weak to pull thousands of icy bodies into such a tight, synchronized alignment. The math simply does not work. To create this kind of clustering, you need a mass that is significantly larger than Neptune, positioned much further out, exerting a constant and relentless gravitational pressure on everything in its wake. We are seeing the effects of a ghost, a presence that remains hidden from our telescopes but reveals itself through the behavior of others. It is like watching a curtain move in an empty room. You cannot see who is pulling the fabric, but the movement proves that someone is there. The trans-Neptunian objects are the curtain, and their clustering is the evidence of a hidden architect. What is actually causing this alignment? We are forced to accept that our neighborhood is not as empty as we believed. The void is not a vacuum of influence, but a place where a massive, unseen object is filing each event in space-time itself, leaving a permanent record of its existence in the tilt and lean of these distant worlds. This clustering suggests a world that does not fit into our existing catalogs, an entity that exists in the blind spot of our current technology. The silence of the Kuiper Belt has been broken by this realization. We can no longer claim the solar system ends at the edge of the known planets. The geometry of these orbits is a map leading us toward a destination we have not yet reached. Every new object discovered in this cluster adds another piece to the puzzle, narrowing down the hiding place of the ghost and confirming that the architecture of our home is far more complex than any chart has ever shown. It started as a series of anomalies, small deviations in data that most would have ignored as noise. But when you step back and look at the collective movement of these worlds, the noise becomes a signal. The pattern emerged not from a single discovery, but from the slow accumulation of evidence, revealing how we first spotted the pattern. The process of finding a ghost begins with an exercise in extreme patience, using deep sky surveys to scan the velvet blackness for objects that are barely more than a single pixel of light. These surveys do not look for planets directly, as the distance is too great and the reflected sunlight is too dim, but instead they track the slow drifting paths of frozen remnants. Astronomers watch these distant bodies over years, mapping their trajectories with surgical precision to see if they follow the expected laws of a solar system governed only by the 8 known worlds. When you look at the data from these surveys, you are not seeing a picture, but a series of coordinates moving through a void so vast that our traditional sense of distance fails. As more of these extreme trans-Neptunian objects were cataloged, a strange mathematical coincidence began to emerge. It was not just that they were grouped together in space, but that their orbits shared a specific haunting alignment known as the alignment of perihelion arguments. The perihelion is the point in an orbit where an object reaches its closest approach to the Sun, and in a random universe, these points should be scattered like thrown seeds across the sky. There is no reason for multiple independent worlds, separated by billions of miles, to all decide to make their closest turn toward the Sun in the same general direction. Yet, when the data was plotted, that is exactly what happened. The perihelion arguments were not random. They were clustered. It was as if an invisible hand had reached into the outer darkness and physically nudged these objects, forcing them into a coordinated dance. This alignment is the gravitational fingerprint of something massive. To achieve this level of coordination, you need a constant, relentless pressure, a gravitational shepherd that does not just pass by once every few thousand years, but one that dominates the region with its sheer presence. The mathematical reality of these aligned perihelia suggests a world that is acting as an anchor for the entire outer rim. If there were no hidden mass, the orbits of these distant objects would have drifted apart over millions of years, scattered by the chaotic influence of passing stars or the slow pull of the galactic tide. Instead, they remain locked in this strange asymmetric formation. The alignment tells us that something is pulling them, guiding them, and holding them in place against the natural tendency toward disorder. We are seeing a pattern that cannot be explained by Neptune alone. While Neptune is the giant of our known neighborhood, its reach ends long before these aligned objects begin their journey. To create this specific geometry, you need a mass far greater than any asteroid or comet, and one positioned much further out in the dark. The evidence is written in the angles of their lean, in the way they tilt away from the plane where the other planets reside. When astronomers first saw these aligned perihelion arguments, it felt less like a discovery and more like a revelation. It was the realization that we have been looking at a map of our home that is missing its most distant border. The objects we thought were lonely wanderers are actually markers, breadcrumbs left behind by a hidden architect that has been orbiting in the shadows since the birth of the Sun. We are no longer guessing if something is out there. We are measuring the exact way it bends the paths of everything around it. The more we refine these surveys, the tighter the alignment becomes. Each new object discovered in the deep sky does not break the pattern, but reinforces it, adding another layer of certainty to the existence of a hidden mass. We are reading the silence of the void through the language of geometry, finding that the outer solar system is not a wasteland of random debris, but a structured environment governed by an unseen force. But the scale of this alignment is impossible. To grasp the sheer isolation of this region, you have to leave behind everything you know about the Sun as a source of light and warmth. From our home at one astronomical unit, the Sun is an overwhelming presence, a blinding disk that defines every second of our waking hours and drives the chemistry of our entire world. It is the center of all things, filling the sky with a golden weight that makes it impossible to see the stars during the day. But as you drift further out, past the Kuiper Belt, past the frozen reaches where Neptune holds its lonely watch, the perspective begins to shift in a way that feels almost unnatural. The distance starts to swallow the light. At first, the Sun remains a disk, though it grows smaller and paler, losing its warmth until the sunlight is no longer a blanket, but a thin, fragile veil. By the time you reach the outer edges of our known neighborhood, the Sun has shrunk from a dominant god to a bright, distant star. And then, as you cross the threshold toward 400 astronomical units, something fundamental happens to your vision. The disk vanishes entirely. Beyond this invisible line, the Sun is no longer a circle in the sky. It does not rise or set with the grandeur we experience on Earth. Instead, it becomes a single piercing point of light, a pinpoint, a solitary diamond embedded in an endless velvet night. Even though it remains the brightest object in that distant sky, it possesses no more visual area than the most brilliant stars surrounding it. It is a star among stars, stripped of its identity as our sun, and reduced to a coordinate of light in a void so absolute that the darkness feels heavy against your skin. If you were standing on a world at this distance, the sunlight would not be enough to cast soft shadows or illuminate a landscape with the familiarity of dawn. The environment would be one of stark binary contrasts, blindingly bright where the pinpoint sun hits, and an impenetrable, ink-black shadow everywhere else. There is no twilight here. There is only the needle-thin beam of a distant star and the crushing silence of the deep freeze. This is the territory where the gravitational fingerprints are most legible. In this place of absolute dark, where the sun has lost its visual power, it still retains its grip, but that grip is being contested. The objects we have tracked, those strange, aligned wanderers, are moving through a region where they should be drifting in simple, predictable arcs around that single point of light. They are far beyond the reach of any known planet. Neptune is now a distant memory, a tiny speck of blue lost in the glare of other stars, unable to exert any meaningful influence on these far-flung bodies. Yet, as we observe them from our telescopes, they do not behave like orphans of the solar system. They are not drifting randomly through the dark. Instead, they move with a coordinated purpose, their orbits tilted and shifted in a way that suggests a hidden hand is guiding them through the void. It is as if someone has placed an invisible anchor in the darkness, pulling these objects toward a center that we cannot see. We are looking at a ghost in the machine of our solar system. We can feel its weight. We can calculate its position by the way it bends the paths of everything around it. We can see the wake it leaves in the sea of frozen debris, but the object itself remains hidden, cloaked by the same absolute blackness that turns our sun into a mere spark. The geometry does not lie. The math is screaming that there is a mass present, something substantial enough to rewrite the laws of motion at the edge of our world. The void is no longer empty. It is occupied by a presence that has remained unseen since the beginning of time, watching us from the periphery while we believed we had mapped every corner of our home. We are left with a singular, haunting realization as we stare into that pinpoint light and the darkness beyond it. Who or what is pulling these objects? The light does not fall upon the landscape so much as it pierces it. Imagine a world where the concept of a day is stripped of all its warmth and familiarity. There is no golden hour here, no soft amber glow that signals the end of an afternoon or the beginning of a morning. Instead, there is only the absolute presence of the void, interrupted by a single, unwavering needle of light. This pinpoint sun does not bathe the world in radiance. It casts a glare that feels clinical and cold, illuminating only what it hits with a precision that leaves everything else in total, suffocating darkness. If you were to look up from the surface of such a place, you would feel a vertigo unlike any other. On Earth, the sky is a dome that protects us, a blue canopy that suggests a boundary. But here, at 400 astronomical units, the sky is not a ceiling. It is an abyss. The stars do not twinkle in the way we know them. They are steady, frozen lanterns of distant fire, and among them our sun has lost its sovereignty. It has become just another coordinate in the celestial map, a bright spark that refuses to vanish but fails to comfort. You can almost feel the weight of this distance pressing against you. The space between that pinpoint of light and where you stand is not merely empty. It is an ocean of silence so profound that it feels physical. It is a territory where time seems to stretch and slow, as if the very fabric of reality has grown thin and tired at the edge of the system. In this stillness, the only thing that remains constant is the invisible pull, the silent conversation between masses that we cannot see. The darkness here is not like the night we experience in our cities, or even in the deepest forests of Earth. It is a primordial blackness, a velvet curtain that has never been drawn back since the birth of the solar system. When you move through this environment, you are moving through a region where the sun's light is no longer a force of nature, but a fragile ghost. The shadows are not gray or soft, they are absolute. To step out of the line of sight of that distant spark is to vanish entirely from the universe. And yet, within this crushing dark, there is a hidden architecture. We can sense it in the way the frozen wanderers move. They do not drift like autumn leaves in a breeze. They glide with a heavy, calculated grace. Their paths are curved by something that possesses an immense, unseen gravity, a presence that does not need to be seen to be felt. It is as if we are watching the ripples on the surface of a midnight pond, knowing that something massive has just slipped beneath the water, leaving only a widening circle of evidence in its wake. We are witnessing a gravitational dance performed in total secrecy. The objects we track from our distant telescopes are like messengers, their skewed orbits telling us about a master they serve in the shadows. Every tilt of an axis, every strange deviation in a path, is a word in a language we are only just beginning to translate. We are listening to the silence of the edge, and that silence is speaking of a giant. It is a haunting realization that while we have looked at the stars for millennia, the most significant secret of our own home was hiding in plain sight, cloaked by the sheer scale of the void. The sun may be reduced to a spark, but the gravity it once commanded has been joined by another, an invisible partner pulling from the periphery. We are no longer alone in the dark. We are simply waiting for the light to finally catch up to what the math already knows is there. When the first simulations began to emerge from the computers at Caltech, the reaction was not one of excitement, but of a profound and heavy silence. The astronomers who had spent their lives mapping the outer reaches of our home did not celebrate when the data suggested a hidden world. Instead, they went very quiet. They looked at the screens and felt a sudden instinctive resistance to what the math was telling them. To accept these results meant accepting that the map we had relied upon was fundamentally incomplete. It meant admitting that something massive had been hiding in our own backyard since the birth of the sun, undetected by every telescope and sensor ever pointed at the sky. The team did not believe their own simulations. They assumed there was a ghost in the code, a rounding error, or a subtle bias in how they were, selecting the trans-Neptunian objects for study. In the scientific community, when you find something that breaks the established order of the solar system, your first instinct is not to claim discovery, but to prove yourself wrong. They spent weeks and months attempting to dismantle their own hypothesis. They rewrote the scripts, they scrubbed the data, they ran the simulations again, then a third time, then a 10th, hoping that the pattern would dissolve into random noise. But every single time they hit enter, the same result returned from the void. The orbits of those distant, frozen wanderers refused to be random. No matter how many times the calculations were repeated, the geometry always pointed back to the same invisible center of gravity. The math was not an error, it was a mandate. The simulations showed that without a massive object pulling on these bodies, the clustering they observed should have been smeared across the sky by now, erased by the chaotic drift of eons. The disbelief shifted from the code to the reality of the cosmos itself. How could something so large escape our sight? We had mapped the asteroid belt and peered into the heart of the Oort cloud, yet here was a gravitational fingerprint that suggested a giant was pacing the perimeter of our world. It felt like a betrayal of everything we thought we knew about our celestial neighborhood. The people who built these instruments found themselves staring at their monitors in a state of quiet shock, realizing that they were no longer looking for a possibility, but for a necessity. The community began to realize that this was not a matter of if the object existed, but where it was hiding and what exactly it was. They had tracked the wake of the ship, they had measured the ripple in the water, and they had calculated the weight of the anchor. Now, all that remained was to find the ghost itself. The mathematical necessity had become an obsession, a puzzle that demanded a physical answer. They stopped asking if there was something out there. They began to ask what it looked like. As they refined the simulations, the blurry gravitational smudge began to take a specific shape. It was no longer just a nameless mass, it was becoming a profile. The numbers started to coalesce into a portrait of a world that defied the traditional categories of our solar system. An entity with a weight and a presence that changed everything we understood about the edge of the dark. The silence that followed those calculations was not the peaceful kind. It was a heavy, suffocating stillness that filled the rooms of Caltech and echoed through the digital corridors of shared datasets. For these researchers, the math had stopped being a tool for discovery and had become a mirror reflecting an uncomfortable truth. They were staring at a void where there should have been nothing, yet that void was pulling on everything around it with a relentless, invisible hand. This is the specific kind of vertigo that strikes when the universe refuses to align with your textbooks. It is the feeling of standing on solid ground only to realize the earth beneath you is drifting. They began to obsess over the smallest details of their process. They questioned the very nature of the light they were measuring, wondering if some unknown atmospheric distortion or a systemic glitch in the telescopes was creating a phantom pattern. In the quiet hours of the night, when the blue light of the monitors was the only thing illuminating their faces, they chased ghosts through lines of code. They looked for the one missing variable that would make the clustering disappear, praying for an error that would restore the solar system to its familiar 8-planet simplicity. Because if the math was right, then the darkness beyond Neptune was not empty, it was occupied. There is a profound psychological weight to realizing you have been blind to something massive in your own home. The researchers felt as though they were uncovering a hidden door in a house they had lived in their entire lives, only to find that the room behind it was larger than the rest of the building combined. Every simulation they ran served as a rhythmic reminder of this absence. Each time the software processed the orbits of those distant ice worlds and returned the same skewed alignment, it felt like a whisper from the edge of the system, insisting on its own existence. The frustration grew into a form of scientific mourning. They were mourning the loss of a complete map. For decades, the boundary of our neighborhood had seemed defined, a neat arrangement of gas giants and frozen rocks ending in a predictable fade toward the interstellar medium. Now that certainty was dissolving. The team found themselves arguing not about whether the object existed, but how it could possibly have remained hidden for so long. They traced the hypothetical path of this giant, imagining it gliding through the absolute black, millions of miles from any other significant body, a lonely sentinel watching us from a distance we can barely comprehend. This was no longer just an academic exercise in celestial mechanics. It had become a haunting. The gravitational fingerprint was so clear, so insistent, that ignoring it felt like a denial of reality itself. They described the sensation as being in a room with someone you cannot see, but whose breath you can feel on your neck. You cannot prove they are there through sight or sound, but every movement you make is influenced by their presence. Every object in the outer solar system was reacting to this unseen guest, dancing to a tune played by a musician hiding behind a curtain of infinite night. They began to spend hours simply staring at the gaps in the data, imagining the sheer scale of the silence that existed out there. If such a mass were truly pacing the perimeter of our world, it would be moving through a region of space so empty that the concept of distance loses all meaning. The researchers felt a strange kinship with this hidden entity, a shared isolation. They were the only ones who knew the ghost was there, holding the secret in their spreadsheets while the rest of the world continued to believe in the old map. The resistance finally broke not through a single epiphany, but through the sheer exhaustion of trying to be wrong. When you've tried every possible way to dismantle your own discovery and failed 10,000 times, the only thing left is acceptance. The disbelief transformed into a quiet, trembling curiosity. They stopped fighting the math and started listening to it. They realized that the universe does not care about our maps or our comfort. It only cares about gravity. And gravity never lies. The ghost was real, the map was broken, and for the first time in generations, the solar system felt vast and mysterious once again. The numbers began to settle into a shape that was no longer an abstract ripple, but a physical presence with a specific weight. Caltech's repeated simulations targeted a specific type of massive object rather than generic mass. The gravity required to herd those distant icy bodies into their strange aligned orbits demanded something far more substantial than a stray asteroid or a forgotten dwarf planet. It needed a world with enough pull to dominate the outer darkness, a silent anchor that could bend the paths of everything in its wake. The calculations pointed toward a super-Earth, or perhaps a mini-Neptune, an entity that exists in the gap between the rocky worlds we know and the gas giants that define our outer reaches. This is not a world like ours, small and fragile, nor is it a bloated sphere of hydrogen like Jupiter. Instead, the data suggests a mass estimated between 5 and 10 times that of Earth. If you were to place this hidden world on a scale against our own planet, the imbalance would be profound. A world with 5 times the mass of Earth would possess a gravitational grip capable of crushing most geological structures we recognize, pulling everything toward a dense, heavy core. At 10 times our mass, it becomes a titan of the void, a planetary heavyweight that dictates the destiny of its neighbors across billions of miles. This specific range of mass is what makes the ghost so haunting. It is large enough to be an undeniable sovereign of the outer solar system, yet small enough to remain invisible against the backdrop of the Milky Way. A gas giant like Saturn would have been spotted long ago by its own infrared glow or its massive silhouette. But a super-Earth, cold and compact, can hide in plain sight. It is a predator of light, absorbing what little reaches it from the distant sun and reflecting almost nothing back to our telescopes. The scientists who stared at these mass estimates felt a strange tension between certainty and invisibility. The math was screaming that this 5 to 10 times Earth mass existed, yet every single image they processed returned only the same empty blackness. It is one thing to suspect a small rock is missing from your map. It is entirely another to realize there is a world larger than our own, hiding in the basement of the solar system. This realization changes how we perceive the architecture of our home. We are used to thinking of Earth as the standard for rocky planets, but Planet 9 suggests that our neighborhood might actually be dominated by these mid-sized giants, worlds that are common across the galaxy but missing from our textbooks. It suggests that we aren't living in a system of small rocks and giant gas balls, but in a complex hierarchy where a hidden middle class of planets governs the furthest reaches of the dark. The mass is not just a number, it is a signature. Every object in the Kuiper Belt that deviates from its expected path is essentially reporting back to us about this weight. They are like small bells ringing in the wind, and the wind is the gravitational wake of a world 10 times our size. The more we measure those distant objects, the more the silhouette of this giant becomes clear. We can feel its weight in the way it tugs at the fabric of space, creating a subtle slope that forces everything else to slide toward a specific alignment. It is an invisible hand, guiding the drift of ice and stone through a region where we once thought there was only chaos. With such immense mass, Planet 9 does not merely visit the edge, it dominates it. It sits there as a silent sentinel, its gravity acting as a bridge between the structured inner system and the wild, unexplored expanse of interstellar space. We have spent years looking for something we could see, forgetting that in the deep cosmos, the most important things are often those that can only be felt. We are no longer searching for a spark of light in the dark. We are searching for the source of a pull, a heavy, cold heart beating slowly at the perimeter of our existence. The mass is there. The gravity is real. The ghost has a weight that cannot be ignored. And yet, knowing how heavy it is does not tell us where it is. We know its strength, we know its scale, and we know it is out there, pacing the long shadows of the void. But as the search area expands into millions of square miles of empty space, a more frustrating question emerges. Where exactly does it hide? Reach out your hand and imagine it brushing against a surface that has not known warmth since the dawn of time. Feel the texture beneath your fingertips, a crust of nitrogen and methane ice so hard it feels like diamond, yet as brittle as glass. There is no wind here to bite at your skin, only a stillness so absolute it feels heavy, pressing down on you with the weight of a world that has forgotten what it means to be seen. This is the skin of the hidden giant, a place where the surface temperature is estimated to stay below 50 Kelvin. To grasp that number is to move beyond the limits of human experience. 50 Kelvin is not merely cold, it is a state of near total molecular surrender. At this temperature, gases that we breathe as air on Earth do not float. They freeze. They settle into frozen plains and jagged mountains of solid neon and nitrogen, creating a landscape of iridescent charcoal blue ice that reflects nothing but the void. If you were to stand upon this surface, your own warmth would be an impossible anomaly, a violent flare in a region where thermal energy has almost ceased to exist. The silence here is not just the absence of sound, but the presence of a profound frozen equilibrium. In the inner solar system, we are used to the chaos of weather, the roar of oceans, and the shifting of tectonic plates. But on this world, everything has slowed down to a crawl. The chemistry of the surface happens in slow motion, with atoms vibrating at the lowest possible frequencies allowed by physics. It is a world of crystalline sculptures where the geography is written in the language of absolute zero. Imagine the horizon of such a place. There is no blue sky to meet the eye, only a velvet blackness that stretches infinitely in every direction. The sun, which governs everything we know about life and time, is nothing more than a single piercingly bright point of light, barely distinguishable from the distant stars. It provides no heat, only a ghostly illumination that casts long, sharp shadows across the nitrogen frost. In this dim light, the planet does not feel like a home or even a place, but rather a wandering monument to isolation. We often think of planets as active things, engines of geology and atmosphere, but at 50 Kelvin, Planet 9 is more like a vault. It preserves the original chemistry of the solar nebula, locking away secrets in its frozen depths that have remained undisturbed for billions of years. The ice under your hand is not just water, it is a chemical archive, a frozen record of the gas and dust that existed before the first oceans ever formed on Earth. The sheer scale of this coldness creates a strange kind of peace. There are no storms to fight, no volcanoes to fear. There's only the slow, rhythmic pulse of a world drifting through the dark, carrying its burden of ice across distances we can barely map. It exists in a permanent midnight, where the concept of a day or a year loses all meaning. Time here is not measured by the rising and setting of a sun, but by the agonizingly slow movement of the planet along its invisible track. When you touch that frozen surface, you are touching the edge of our influence. You are standing on the perimeter of the light, where the grip of the sun finally begins to fail and the interstellar void begins to take over. This world is the bridge between the familiar and the alien, a cold sentinel marking the boundary of our celestial neighborhood. It is a place of absolute purity and absolute loneliness, where the only company is the gravitational pull of the stars beyond. The physical reality of such a world, its crushing cold, its charcoal skies, and its silent plains, is almost too much for the mind to hold. We are creatures of warmth and light, yet we have found the fingerprint of this frozen ghost using nothing but the logic of mathematics and the patience of our telescopes. We can feel its presence not through a photograph, but through the way it bends the paths of other smaller worlds, forcing them into an alignment that defies every rule we thought we knew about the outer system. It is a haunting realization that while we look up at the night sky and see a void, there is a physical entity out there, a world 5 to 10 times our mass, enduring a cold that would shatter any machine we have ever built. It moves through the dark with a slow, inevitable grace, unseen by every eye in human history, yet governing the movement of thousands of icy fragments in its wake. The gravity of this giant is like a whisper that echoes across billions of miles, telling us that our map of the solar system is not a finished drawing, but a sketch. We have spent centuries staring at the 8 planets we know, assuming the house was complete, only to realize there is a door we haven't opened and a room where the temperature never rises above 50 Kelvin. As you pull your hand away from that imagined ice, as you leave the charcoal plains and the pinpoint sun behind, you are left with a sense of profound displacement. We are not the center of this system, nor even its primary residence. We are merely observers of a much larger, colder architecture, one that operates on timescales that dwarf human civilization. The ghost is there, pacing the perimeter, a heavy heart of ice beating in the silence. But as we contemplate the frozen surface and the absolute dark, we must ask how such a massive world manages to stay hidden for so long. The answer lies not just in its distance or its dimness, but in the strange shape of its journey. To grasp the motion of this hidden giant is to step outside the rhythm of a human life and enter the scale of deep time. We measure our existence in decades, perhaps a century if we are fortunate, but Planet 9 moves to a cadence that makes an entire civilization feel like a momentary flicker of light. Based on the gravitational fingerprints left behind, the orbital period of this world is estimated to be between 10,000 and 20,000 Earth years. 10,000 years. If you were standing on its charcoal surface today, watching that single distant pinpoint of a sun, you would have to wait through 10 millennia just to complete one single journey around the center of our system. To put that into perspective, if Planet 9 had passed its closest point to the sun, when humans first began to settle in the Fertile Crescent and develop the very first seeds of agriculture, it would only be returning to that same spot now. The entirety of recorded human history, the rise and fall of every empire, the invention of writing, the Industrial Revolution, the first step on the moon, would barely constitute a fraction of one single orbit for this lonely world. It is a slow, sweeping arc through the absolute dark, a journey so vast that the planet spends most of its life in a region where the sun provides almost no warmth and even less light. While Earth zips around the sun every 365 days, Planet 9 drifts with a heavy glacial patience. It does not rush, it does not flicker, it simply exists as a constant silent weight in the outer void, pulling on the frozen debris of the Kuiper Belt with an invisible hand that never tires. We are talking about a cycle where the stars themselves shift their positions in the sky due to precession before the planet even reaches its furthest point from the sun. In the time it takes for this giant to complete one orbit, the very climate of Earth could shift from ice age to temperate and back again several times over. The glaciers that carved our valleys have come and gone, while Planet 9 was merely halfway through a single lap. There is something profoundly isolating about that number. 20,000 years of silence. 20,000 years of gliding through a region where the only company is the occasional stray comet or a drifting shard of primordial ice. It moves in a space so remote that it essentially operates on its own clock, disconnected from the frantic energy of the inner planets. While Jupiter and Saturn dance their complex gravitational ballet in the mid-system, Planet 9 remains a distant sentinel, pacing the perimeter of our solar neighborhood with an indifference born of sheer scale. This orbital period tells us something critical about the nature of the ghost we are hunting. It confirms that this is not some captured asteroid or a small stray moon that wandered too far from home. To maintain such a massive orbit while still influencing the paths of other distant objects requires a world of significant presence. A smaller object would have been tossed aside by the gravity of the gas giants long ago. But a world with an orbital period of 10,000 to 20,000 years suggests a stable, ancient architecture, a piece of the original puzzle that was pushed outward during the chaotic birth of the solar system and has remained there, circling in the dark, ever since. The sheer length of this year creates a sensory void. On Earth, we mark time by the seasons, the tilt of our axis bringing spring blossoms or winter snows. But on Planet 9, a season would last 2,000 years. A single winter could span an entire epoch of human development. The transition from its furthest point to its closest point would be so gradual that no observer, if there were any, would ever perceive the change in real time. They would simply exist in a permanent state of twilight where the sun is always a distant spark and the cold is an absolute, unchanging constant. Batygin and Brown's data represents more than coordinates on a map. It is a clock, ticking once every few millennia. The mathematics demand this slow pace because any faster, and the planet would be too close to Neptune to have remained undetected. Any slower, and it wouldn't have enough gravitational grip to align those distant trans-Neptunian objects into the clusters we now observe. It exists in a perfect, haunting equilibrium, far enough to stay hidden, but heavy enough to leave its mark on the void. This realization forces us to confront the limits of our own observation. We have spent only a few centuries looking at the stars with telescopes, and in that tiny window of time, we expected to see everything. We assumed that because we could see Neptune, we had seen the edge. But how can we expect to easily find a world whose entire year is 20 times longer than all of modern astronomy combined? We are trying to catch a glimpse of something that moves with such agonizing slowness that it almost appears stationary against the backdrop of the stars. It is like trying to perceive the growth of a mountain by watching it for a single second. To the casual observer, the mountain does not move, but over geological time, it rises and falls. Planet 9 is the geological equivalent of a planet. Its movements are written in deep time, requiring us to use mathematics as our eyes, because our biological lifespan is too short to witness its journey. The ghost continues its slow drift, carving a path through the outer dark that we can only imagine. It has been there since the beginning, watching the solar system settle into its current form from a distance of hundreds of astronomical units. It has seen the planets migrate and the debris clear, all while maintaining its own solitary rhythm. And yet, for so long, this massive presence remained an invisible variable in our equations. We looked at the outer reaches of our home and saw a void where we expected to see nothing more than scattered ice and dust. The map we drew seemed complete because it fit every observation we had made since the discovery of Neptune. It felt logical, It felt finished. For a long time, our understanding of the outer solar system was defined by a single, dominant presence. Neptune sat at the edge of our maps as the ultimate shepherd, the final heavy hand that dictated where every piece of ice and rock should drift. This historical consensus on Neptune's gravitational dominance felt absolute because it worked. It explained why the Kuiper Belt existed in its specific ring, and why most trans-Neptunian objects followed predictable, orderly paths around the Sun. To the scientific community, Neptune was the boundary marker, the sentinel that kept the outer darkness organized. The logic was simple and elegant. In a system where mass is power, the largest body in a region controls on everything around it. Since Neptune was the last giant planet we could see, it was only natural to assume it held the leash of every distant object discovered since its identification. Every wobbling orbit or drifting comet was viewed through this lens, treated as a minor perturbation caused by the blue giant's massive pull. We believed that once you moved past Neptune, the gravitational influence of the planets faded into a whisper, leaving only the Sun to hold the remnants of the solar system together in a fragile, lonely grip. This belief wasn't based on guesswork, but on a legacy of success. The very discovery of Neptune itself had been a triumph of mathematics over sight. Astronomers saw an anomaly in Uranus's orbit and predicted exactly where another planet must be hiding to cause that shift. When they pointed their telescopes at those coordinates, the planet was there. That victory cemented a deep trust in the idea that if something is pulling on the distant reaches of space, it will eventually show up as a visible sphere of gas or rock. We lived with this certainty for generations. The map felt finished because Neptune provided a satisfying conclusion to the story of the planets. It was the anchor of the abyss. We assumed that any strange behavior in the farthest corners of the system was simply a result of our lack of data, or perhaps a misunderstanding of how small, icy bodies interacted with one another. There was no need for a ghost when we already had a giant. The gravitational architecture seemed closed. The orbits of the distant objects were expected to be random or neatly aligned with the plane of the planets, all dancing to the tune played by Neptune's mass. It was a comfortable arrangement, a celestial clockwork that required no further adjustment. We viewed the void beyond Neptune not as a place of hidden monsters, but as a quiet graveyard of frozen debris, drifting in an eternal, undisturbed sleep. But the universe rarely respects our desire for comfort. The mathematics that had once given us Neptune began to whisper something different about the objects furthest from the Sun. Some of these distant travelers were moving in ways that did not make sense. If Neptune was the only shepherd in the dark, they drifted in clusters, their aligned paths suggesting an invisible force guiding them from deeper within the void. The more we looked at these anomalies, the more the old consensus began to fray. The gravitational dominance of Neptune was real, but it was no longer sufficient to explain the geometry of the edge. We were seeing fingerprints on a glass where no one was standing, movements that required a mass far greater than anything in our current catalog. And yet, a specific object broke that rule. Then came Sedna. When astronomers first spotted this distant reddish speck of ice, it invalidated their existing maps. In a well-ordered system, every object in the outer reaches should feel the tug of Neptune, dancing in some loose synchronization with the blue giant. But Sedna was different. It moved as if Neptune did not exist. The geometry of its journey is an extreme, lonely ellipse that defies everything we understood about the solar system's edge. At its closest approach, its perihelion reaches approximately 76 astronomical units from the Sun. To put that in perspective, it is more than double the distance of the Kuiper Belt's outer rim. Even at its absolute nearest point to us, Sedna remains far beyond the reach of Neptune's gravitational grip. It exists in a region where the blue giant's influence should be a whisper, yet Sedna behaves as if that whisper were total silence. But it is the other side of its orbit that reveals the true scale of the isolation. As Sedna swings away from the sun, it drifts into a darkness so profound it becomes almost conceptual. Its aphelion reaches nearly 937 astronomical units. That is a distance where the solar system ceases to feel like a neighborhood and begins to feel like an endless void. At that far point, the sun is no longer a source of warmth or significant light. It is merely one star among billions in the velvet black. What does it mean for a world to be flung that far out? If Neptune cannot pull Sedna back, then something else must have pushed it there, or something even more distant is holding onto its leash. The orbit of Sedna is not a circle, nor is it a gentle oval. It is a jagged needle piercing the deep space between our sun and the neighboring stars. It suggests that the architecture of our home is far more violent and complex than the neat diagrams we used to draw. And when the team first processed these numbers, there was a quiet realization that they were looking at an orphan. Sedna does not belong to the Kuiper Belt, nor does it fit into the classical Oort cloud models. It exists in a gravitational no man's land. To find such an object is to realize that our census of the solar system has missed something fundamental. We are like people who have mapped every room in their house, only to find a door in the basement that leads to a forest we never knew existed. The sheer mathematics of Sedna's path requires a massive presence. To bend an orbit into such a stretched, eccentric shape takes a tremendous amount of energy and gravitational force. You cannot achieve this with small asteroids or wandering comets. You need a heavy hand. You need a mass that can reach across hundreds of astronomical units to warp the trajectory of a frozen world. As we tracked Sedna and other similar bodies, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Their drift was not random. They followed a hidden script. Their orbits were being sculpted by an invisible sculptor. The data points began to converge on a single haunting conclusion. There is something out there, lurking in the frozen dark, whose mass is great enough to dictate the movement of worlds from billions of miles away. It is a gravitational fingerprint left behind by a ghost. We can see where it has been, and we can feel the wake it leaves in the fabric of space-time. But the object itself remains hidden, draped in the absolute shadow of the outer rim. The more we study Sedna's lonely arc, the more certain we become that we are not alone in our own system, and that we are simply waiting for our eyes to be strong enough to see a different kind of hidden mass. Imagine the silence of that distance. It is not a silence born of peace, but a silence born of absolute absence. At nearly 937 astronomical units, the vacuum of space becomes an oppressive weight, a cold so profound it ceases to be a temperature and becomes a state of existence. Here, in the farthest reaches of Sedna's journey, there is no wind, no atmosphere, no shimmering aurora. There is only the slow, rhythmic pulse of a world drifting through a graveyard of frozen gases and ancient dust. The darkness here has a different quality than the night we know on Earth. On our home, the night is merely a shadow cast by the planet itself. But at Sedna's aphelion, the night is total. It is the primordial dark that existed before the first stars ignited. The only interruption in this velvet void is the sun, which has shrunk from a roaring furnace to a needle point of light. It provides no warmth to the nitrogen ice of the surface. It offers no gold or amber hues to the horizon. It is simply a distant cold diamond, one among billions, marking the center of a system that Sedna has almost entirely left behind. We often think of orbits as clockwork, as neat circles etched into the fabric of space, but look at the path Sedna carves. It is a violent trajectory, a desperate stretch across the void. To visualize this is to realize how fragile our understanding of stability truly is. For millions of years, Sedna has been swinging through this abyss, moving with a slow, agonizing patience that defies human comprehension. It spends centuries in the deep freeze, drifting further and further away from everything we call home, only to be pulled back by an unseen hand toward a sun it can barely feel. This motion is not natural for a body of its size. In a balanced system, Sedna should have been captured by Neptune or flung entirely out into the interstellar medium to become a rogue world. Instead, it remains tethered. It is bound to our sun, yet separated from every other planet by a continent of emptiness. This tension creates a haunting realization. Sedna is not just a piece of ice, it is a witness. Its very existence is a record of a gravitational encounter so massive that it rewrote the laws of its motion. Think for a moment about the scale of that influence. To warp an orbit to this degree requires a presence that does not merely nudge, but commands. It is the difference between a pebble creating ripples in a pond and a boulder crashing into the water. Something moved through our outer solar system with enough mass to seize Sedna and fling it into this extreme elliptical path, leaving it stranded in a region where no other known planet can reach. The data does not lie. Even when it contradicts everything we thought we knew about the Kuiper Belt, the clustering of these distant objects is not a coincidence. It is a signature. It is as if we are looking at a field of fallen leaves and realizing they have all been blown in exactly the same direction by a wind we cannot feel. We can see the effect, the tilted orbits, the strange alignments, the lonely arc of Sedna. But the cause remains an invisible ghost. This invisibility is what makes the search so visceral. It is not just a matter of better telescopes or more sensitive detectors. It is the feeling that there is a predator in the house, something immense and silent that has been watching us from the shadows since the dawn of time. We have spent centuries mapping the inner circles, polishing our knowledge of Mars and Jupiter, believing we had seen the boundaries of our world. But Sedna tells us that the boundary is an illusion. The solar system does not end where the maps say it does. It merely fades into a darkness where something larger still resides. We are left to contemplate the geometry of this void, wondering how many other orphans like Sedna are drifting in the deep. How many frozen worlds are currently at their aphelion, staring back at our distant sun as a single point of light, waiting for the invisible sculptor to pull them back toward the center. The more we stare into that gap, the more we realize that the silence is not empty. It is filled with the gravitational weight of a world that refuses to be found. The search for this hidden world is not a hunt for a bright beacon, but a patient vigil against a backdrop of absolute black. To find Planet 9, astronomers must engage in a grueling exercise of human patience, staring into the void and waiting for a single pixel of light to shift its position by a fraction of a degree over several months. It is a slow-motion chase where the prey does not want to be seen, draped in a darkness so profound that it swallows almost every photon the distant sun manages to provide. The primary struggle lies in what astronomers call visual magnitude. In the language of the sky, magnitude is a measure of brightness, and for an object drifting hundreds of astronomical units away, that value drops into a territory of extreme faintness. A world 5 to 10 times the mass of Earth might sound imposing, but at these distances, it does not shine. It possesses no internal fire to light its own way, and the sunlight hitting its surface is so diluted that the planet reflects only a ghostly, microscopic amount of light back toward our lenses. Detecting an object with such low visual magnitude is like trying to spot a single charcoal-colored pebble thrown into a midnight ocean from several miles away. The signal is so weak it barely registers above the electronic noise of the camera sensors. Astronomers must take multiple exposures, stacking images on top of one another for weeks or months, hoping that While the distant stars remain fixed and frozen in their constellations, one lone pixel will exhibit a tiny rhythmic drift. That movement is the only evidence we have. The planet does not announce itself with a flare or a signature. It simply exists as a mathematical probability moving through a sea of static. If the telescope is not pointed at the exact right patch of sky at the exact right moment, the object remains invisible, hidden by the sheer scale of the search area. We are looking for a needle in a haystack, but the haystack is the entire celestial sphere, and the needle is nearly the same color as the hay. There is a quiet tension in this process. The team knows the math demands a presence there, yet the instruments return nothing but silence. It creates a strange psychological loop where the more we fail to see it, the more we trust the gravity that tells us it must be there. We are trusting the invisible pull over the visible light. Every empty image is not a failure, but a narrowing of the map, a slow carving away of where the ghost cannot be, until only one small sliver of the dark remains. This search forces us to confront the limits of our current technology. Our greatest mirrors are still too small, our sensors still too blind to catch the faint glimmer of a world that has spent billions of years in isolation. We are peering through a keyhole at a room that is miles wide, hoping for a glimpse of something moving in the corner, and yet, as the search continues and the void remains stubbornly empty, some have begun to wonder if we are looking for the wrong thing entirely. Perhaps the reason our telescopes cannot find a frozen sphere of rock and ice is because there is no surface for the light to bounce off of. This realization opens the door to a far more radical alternative theory. To grasp the physical presence of this ghost, we have to move beyond the math and find a way to see it in our mind's eye. If you were to take a single marble and place it on the floor of a vast, dark cathedral, a space so immense that the ceiling is lost in shadow and the walls stretch for miles into the gloom, that marble would be Planet 9. The cathedral itself represents the staggering volume of the outer solar system, an ocean of emptiness where distances are measured not in miles, but in the time it takes light to travel. In this scale, a world that seems massive to us is nothing more than a speck of glass lost in a void of obsidian. The calculations suggest a body with an estimated diameter 2 to 4 times that of Earth. On our own world, such a size would be incomprehensible. It would be a sphere of rock and ice so large that its gravity would crush the very mountains we climb. It is a super-Earth, a category of planet, Eos, that is common across the Milky Way, but entirely absent from our own inner neighborhood. We are searching for a giant that has spent billions of years in total isolation, drifting through a region where there is no one to see it and nothing to warm it. If you could stand on its surface, the horizon would curve away with a slow, heavy grace, stretching out into a nitrogen ice haze that never lifts. The sheer volume of this world means it holds an immense amount of internal heat, perhaps a dying ember from the birth of the sun, trapped beneath thousands of miles of frozen crust. But in the context of the solar system's edge, this giant is still a ghost. It occupies a space so wide that if you were to fly a modern spacecraft toward it, you would spend lifetimes crossing the distance before you ever saw the curve of its limb against the stars. This discrepancy between the planet's actual size and its perceived invisibility is what makes the search so haunting. We are looking for something that is physically substantial, a world larger than our own, yet it remains a mathematical whisper. It exists in the tension between being a physical object with a diameter twice or 4 times our own, and being a phantom that refuses to reflect enough light to be seen. The more we refine the estimate of its size, the more impossible its hiding place feels. How does a world of that magnitude vanish so completely? The answer lies in the way it moves through the dark. It does not follow the neat, flat disk where the other planets reside. While Earth, Mars, and Jupiter glide along a relatively thin plane, this hidden giant operates on a different logic entirely. It ignores the shared highway of the solar system, carving its own path through the three-dimensional void. The tilt of the world is where the mystery deepens. This shift in perspective changes everything we thought we knew about our place in the dark. We have spent our history viewing the solar system as a flat disk, a tidy arrangement of spheres gliding along a shared plane like needles on a vinyl record. It is a comforting architecture, one that suggests order and predictability, but this hidden giant does not play by those rules. It exists in a state of permanent defiance, carving a path that ignores the collective agreement of the other planets. The geometry of its journey reveals an orbital inclination of 15 to 25 degrees relative to the ecliptic. While we move within the thin slice of the solar system's waist, Planet 9 is climbing and diving through the three-dimensional void. It sees the rest of us from above and below, drifting through a region where the very concept of a horizon begins to dissolve into the black. This tilt is not merely a mathematical detail, it is an existential revelation. It tells us that our map was not just missing a piece, but that we were looking at the wrong dimension entirely. We are discovering that we live in a house with a room we haven't found yet. For all our telescopes and probes, for all our calculations of gravity and light, there is a vast, silent corridor extending far beyond the gates of Neptune where something massive has been waiting. It is as if we had spent our entire lives exploring a sprawling mansion, only to realize there is a hidden staircase leading to a wing of the house that operates under different laws of physics. The realization creates a strange, quiet tension in the mind. We are not the masters of this neighborhood. We are merely residents of the inner courtyard, unaware of the giant pacing the outer perimeter. This spatial dislocation forces us to question how such a world came to be. If it was born here, why did it end up so far from the hearth of the sun, tilted and isolated? If it was captured from another star, what does that say about our early history in the galaxy? The more we map this inclination, the more the planet feels less like a sibling to Earth or Jupiter and more like an intruder. It is a gravitational ghost that has spent billions of years watching us from an angle we cannot perceive without the help of complex equations. We often think of the void as empty space between destinations, but in the case of Planet 9, the void is where the real story is written. The distance it covers in its long, lonely orbit creates a silence so profound that only the movement of other distant rocks can betray its presence. We are listening to the echoes of a world we cannot see, interpreting the way small frozen objects are nudged and pulled by an invisible hand. Each orbital shift, each strange alignment of a trans-Neptunian object is a breadcrumb, leading us further away from the center. There is a humbling quality to this search. It reminds us that our perception of reality is limited by the tools we use to measure it. We looked for a planet where planets should be on the flat plane of the ecliptic and found nothing. Only when we allowed the mathematics to lead us into the tilt, into the verticality of the deep void, did the ghost begin to take shape. It is a lesson in cosmic humility. The universe does not organize itself for our convenience. It does not place its secrets where they are easiest to find. As we trace this 15 to 25 degree slope into the darkness, the nature of the object becomes more unsettling. We have spent this journey assuming that if there is a mass out there, it must be a planet, a world of rock and ice, perhaps with an atmosphere of frozen nitrogen and a core of heavy metals. It is the most logical conclusion, the one that fits our understanding of how solar systems are built. But as we stare into the absolute black at the edge of our reach, where the sun is nothing more than a distant cold spark, logic begins to fray. The mathematics require a mass, yes. They demand something with the gravitational pull of several Earths. to keep those distant objects in their strange clusters. But gravity does not always come from a planet. It can come from things far denser, far older, and far more terrifying than a frozen world of ice. There is a possibility that what we are hunting is not a place where one could stand, but something that consumes the very light we use to find it. The weight of this distance is not just a number on a chart, but a physical pressure that settles into the marrow of the mind. Imagine for a moment that you are drifting in that outer dark, far beyond where any human eye has ever looked. There is no horizon here, only an infinite velvet void that swallows every thought before it can fully form. In this place, the concept of a home or a center becomes meaningless. The sun, which provides everything we know about life and warmth, is reduced to nothing more than a cold, distant spark, indistinguishable from the billions of other stars flickering in the deep. You are suspended in a region of space where time seems to stretch and flatten, where a single year on Earth is but a heartbeat in the long, slow respiration of this hidden world. This is the environment that Planet 9 inhabits, a kingdom of absolute stillness and crushing cold. It does not move with the frantic energy of the inner planets. It glides with a glacial patience, tracing an arc so vast that its entire journey takes millennia to complete. To exist there is to be a witness to the slow decay of light. The silence is not merely the absence of sound, but a heavy, tangible presence that wraps around the planet like a shroud. There are no winds here, as we understand them, only the occasional drift of frozen gases settling into craters, carved by impacts from an era when the solar system was still a chaotic forge of fire and stone. We find ourselves staring into this abyss, trying to reconcile our neat maps with this sprawling, tilted reality. For so long, we believed the solar system was a disciplined choir, all planets singing in the same key, orbiting on a single flat plane like a spinning record. But Planet 9 is a dissonant note. It is a reminder that the universe does not care for our desire for symmetry. By drifting 15 to 25 degrees away from the ecliptic, it has effectively stepped out of the room, watching us from a vantage point that makes our entire world seem like a fragile, flickering candle in a gale. This tilt creates a profound sense of isolation. If you were to stand on the surface of such a world, looking back toward the center of the system, you would not see a disk of planets orbiting a star. You would see a distant, glowing needle point of light surrounded by an oppressive darkness that extends in every direction. The loneliness of this position is almost impossible to quantify. It is the loneliness of a sentinel who has forgotten what they were sent to guard, pacing a perimeter that borders the very edge of our sun's gravitational reach. And yet, it is precisely this isolation that makes its influence so haunting. The planet does not need to be seen to be felt. Its presence is whispered through the orbits of smaller, frozen wanderers, the ghosts of the Kuiper Belt, who bend their paths in a synchronized dance that only Planet 9 can lead. We are like detectives examining the footprints left in the snow, never seeing the creature itself, but knowing by the depth and direction of the impressions exactly how heavy it is and where it has been. The realization that we live in such a house, a mansion with hidden wings and locked doors, changes our relationship with the sky. We no longer look up at the stars as distant objects to be cataloged, but as potential neighbors who might be hiding just beyond the reach of our current sight. The void is not empty. It is merely waiting. It is a canvas where gravity writes its secrets, in a language of ellipses and inclinations, challenging us to stop looking for what we expect and start listening to what the silence is actually telling us. The mathematics of gravity are honest, but they are also indifferent to what they are pulling. They tell us there is a mass at the edge of our reach, something heavy enough to shepherd the frozen debris of the outer dark into strange clustered alignments. We have spent years assuming this mass must be a world, a physical place with a surface and an atmosphere, perhaps a lonely giant made of rock and ice that was kicked out from the inner solar system during its violent birth. It is the most comfortable answer because it fits our experience of what planets are. But as we look deeper into the silence of the void, another possibility emerges, one that does not require a planet at all. There is a hypothesis that suggests the ghost in our neighborhood is something far older than any star or planet. Some believe we are hunting for a primordial black hole. These are not the monsters born from the collapse of massive stars, but tiny dense remnants created in the first fractions of a second after the Big Bang. They are relics of the dawn of time, formed when the extreme pressure of the early universe squeezed pockets of matter into singularities. If one such object were captured by our sun's gravity billions of years ago, it would behave exactly like a planet in terms of its pull on other objects, but it would be virtually invisible to every telescope we possess. According to research by Schultz and Unwin, this hidden object could have a mass similar to that of the Earth. Yet, instead of being a world 10,000 miles wide, all of that weight would be crushed into a point smaller than an atom. It is a terrifying thought, a microscopic void floating in the deep freeze, possessing the same gravitational authority as a whole planet. If this were true, we are not looking for a frozen shore or a hidden atmosphere. We are looking for a puncture in the fabric of space-time itself, a tiny point of infinite density that has spent eons drifting through the outer dark, unseen and untouchable. What would it mean to live in a solar system where such a thing resides? A primordial black hole would not emit light, nor would it reflect the distant spark of the sun. It would be a perfect shadow, detectable only by the way it nudges the orbits of trans-Neptunian objects, leaving behind a gravitational fingerprint that we are only now beginning to decode. The search for Planet 9 then becomes a hunt for a ghost from the birth of the universe, a fragment of the first moment of existence hiding in our own celestial backyard. The scale of this possibility shifts everything. We move from searching for a new world to searching for a remnant of creation. It changes the nature of the silence at the edge of the system. Instead of a cold, dormant planet waiting to be photographed, we may be tracing the orbit of something that consumes light and defies our traditional understanding of a planetary body. The void is not just empty space, it is a place where things can hide in plain sight, provided they are dense enough and dark enough to escape our gaze. We find ourselves caught between two visions. In one, there is a super-Earth, a world of frozen nitrogen and crushing pressures drifting through an orbit that takes thousands of years to complete. In the other, there is a microscopic singularity, a needle of infinite mass sewing together the orbits of the farthest objects in our system. Both satisfy the equations. Both explain why the distant debris of the Kuiper Belt does not move randomly, but follows a hidden command. This ambiguity is where the tension lives. We have the math, we have the clues, and we have the gravitational evidence. Yet, the object itself remains a phantom. It is as if we are listening to the footsteps of someone walking through a dark house, hearing the floorboards creak and the doors shift. But when we turn on the light, the room appears empty. We know something is there because the environment reacts to it, but the thing itself refuses to be seen. The frustration of this search is shared by those who spend their nights staring into the noise of deep sky surveys. There are moments when the data seems to align perfectly, only for a new observation to blur the image. It is a game of cosmic hide-and-seek played across billions of miles, where the opponent is either a world too dark to see or an object too small to detect. Yet we do not stop. The drive to resolve this mystery is not just about adding another name to our map. It is about understanding if our solar system is typical, or if it harbors one of these primordial anomalies from the beginning of time. If a black hole with the mass of Earth is indeed orbiting our sun, It tells us that the early universe was far more chaotic and strange than we ever imagined, leaving behind seeds of darkness that can drift across galaxies for billions of years. We are now reaching the limit of what our current instruments can tell us through indirect evidence. We have followed the breadcrumbs from Sedna to the clustered TNOs, and from there to the mathematical models of Caltech. We have mapped the tilt and the mass and the impossible distances. We have theorized about frozen oceans and primordial singularities, but theory is not a discovery. A model is not a photograph. The ghost has been felt for long enough. The gravitational fingerprints are clear, but we need to see the hand that left them. To move beyond hypothesis, we need a new way of looking at the sky, a tool capable of scanning the southern hemisphere with such precision and speed that no matter how faint or how dark the object is, it will eventually betray its position against the stars. We are waiting for a window to open, for a lens to turn toward the void, and finally reveal what has been pulling at the edges of our world since the beginning. The search for a ghost requires more than just patience. It requires a new way of seeing the dark. For years, we have been limited by the narrow field of view of our telescopes, scanning tiny patches of the sky and hoping that the hidden giant happens to be drifting through that specific sliver of void at that exact moment. It is like trying to find a single black needle in a darkened cathedral using only a thin flashlight. The probability is low, the area is vast, and the object we seek is barely reflecting any light at all. We have felt its pull on Sedna and seen its signature in the clustering of distant objects, but the visual confirmation remains just out of reach. This changes with the arrival of a new eye on the southern sky. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory represents a shift in how we map the unknown. Unlike previous surveys that looked deep into one spot, this instrument is designed to look wide and fast. Through the Legacy Survey of Space and Time, or LSST, starting in 2025, the observatory will begin an unprecedented census of our celestial neighborhood. It will not simply take photographs, it will create a living movie of the cosmos. By mapping the entire southern hemisphere every few days, the Rubin Observatory will detect the slightest movement of any object against the background stars. The power of this mission lies in its ability to spot objects with an incredibly low visual magnitude. Planet 9 is likely so far from the sun that it barely glows, a charcoal smudge against the indigo black. But as the LSST scans the void, it will be looking for that specific gravitational fingerprint. A tiny point of light moving with the slow, majestic cadence of a world on a 20,000-year journey. If there is a frozen giant 5 to 10 times the mass of Earth hiding in the shadows, it can no longer stay hidden. The sheer scale of the survey means that wherever the planet is currently drifting, the lens will eventually find it. We are moving from an era of mathematical suspicion to an era of direct observation. The team at Caltech and other researchers who spent years staring at simulations are now waiting for a single pixel of light to betray its position. There is a quiet tension in the scientific community, the kind of silence that falls when you know the answer is finally within reach, but you cannot yet see it. They have refined the orbital predictions and narrowed the search area, but they also know that the universe often reveals things in ways we did not predict. Perhaps the LSST will find a world with an atmosphere of nitrogen ice, or perhaps it will find nothing at all, forcing us to reconsider if the primordial black hole hypothesis is the only answer left. The data from the Rubin Observatory will either crown Planet 9 as the 9th member of our family, or reveal that the anomalies in the Kuiper Belt are caused by something even more strange than a hidden planet. Either way, the map is about to be rewritten. This process of searching for something we cannot see reminds us of how little we actually know about our own home. We have spent centuries looking at the sun and the planets that dance around it, believing we had seen all there was to see. We drew the borders of the solar system and declared them final, and yet here we are realizing that the edge is not a wall, but a doorway. The search for Planet 9 is more than an astronomical exercise. It is a lesson in cosmic humility. It shows us that even in our own backyard, there are secrets that can remain hidden for billions of years, waiting for us to build a lens powerful enough to find them. We are small and the void is immense, and our only tool against the darkness is our willingness to keep looking. The sheer patience required for this search is a form of meditation in itself. We are not looking for a beacon or a signal, but for the absence of randomness. For decades, we have looked at the sky and seen a static curtain of stars, but the Rubin Observatory will treat that curtain as a living skin, one that breathes and shifts over time. It is the difference between looking at a single photograph of a forest and watching a time-lapse of every leaf moving in the wind. In this slow-motion movie of the southern sky, the astronomers are searching for one specific anomaly, a tiny charcoal smudge that refuses to follow the rules of the background stars. Imagine the silence of that region of space where the sunlight is so diluted, it no longer feels like light, but rather a cold, distant memory. In those depths, Planet 9 does not glide. It drifts through a vacuum so absolute that the very concept of distance becomes an abstraction. It moves with a heavy, inevitable momentum, pulling on everything in its wake without ever revealing its face. This is the gravitational ghost we are hunting. We can feel its breath on the orbits of smaller worlds. We can see the way it bends the paths of icy wanderers, yet it remains hidden by the sheer scale of the dark. The tension waiting within the halls of Caltech and across the observatories of the world is not one of excitement, but of profound anticipation. It is the feeling of standing on a shoreline at midnight, knowing that a ship is sailing toward you, though you cannot see its lights. You can only hear the distant sound of the surf and feel the change in the air. For the researchers, the math has already told them the ship is there. The simulations have run thousands of times, each one pointing to the same invisible mass, the same stubborn tilt in the geometry of the void. Now they are simply waiting for the light to catch the hull. When that first pixel finally shifts, when a single point of light moves against the velvet black in exactly the way the equations predicted, it will not be a loud moment. There will be no alarms or flashing lights. Instead, there will be a sudden heavy stillness. A group of people staring at a screen, realizing that for the first time in human history, we are looking at a piece of our home that has been missing since the dawn of the solar system. It is a moment where the abstract becomes physical, where a mathematical ghost finally gains a body and a place on our maps. This search forces us to confront the reality of how much space exists between what we know and what is actually there. We have spent so long polishing the map of the inner planets, detailing every crater on Mars and every ring of Saturn, that we forgot the map was only a sketch. The Rubin Observatory is not just adding a planet to the list. It is reminding us that the darkness is not empty, it is filled with weight and presence. Every void we have assumed was vacant may actually be occupied by something we simply lacked the vision to see. The wait for 2025 is more than a technical countdown. It is a bridge between two ways of understanding our existence. We are moving away from the era where we could claim the solar system was solved and entering an age where we admit that we are still strangers in our own neighborhood. The lens will open, the southern sky will be scanned, and the silence of the edge will finally be asked to speak. Whether it answers with a frozen world or remains silent, the act of asking is what defines us. We are the only part of this vast, cold machinery that has developed the curiosity to look back at its own shadows and ask what is hiding there. It is a strange and quiet irony that we find ourselves in this position. We spend our lives feeling small, dwarfed by the sheer scale of a solar system, that stretches out for billions of miles into a freezing dark. We feel insignificant because our entire history exists on a speck of dust orbiting a common star. But there is a hidden strength in that insignificance. Our very fragility is what allows us to be the mirror for this cosmic scale. The universe does not know it is vast. The void between Neptune and the edge of the Oort cloud has no concept of its own emptiness. A primordial black hole, if it exists at the edge of our home, cannot feel the loneliness of its orbit or the cold of a space that barely registers above absolute zero. These things simply are. They exist in a state of silent, unconscious persistence. But we are different. We are the part of the cosmos that woke up. Human consciousness is the only thing in this entire sector of the galaxy capable of translating gravity into geometry. The mathematics used by the teams at Caltech to predict Planet 9 are not just numbers on a screen. They are an act of perception. By recognizing the clustering of distant objects and the strange tilt of their orbits, we have turned the invisible pull of a hidden mass into a thought. We have taken the silent language of the void and translated it into a map. This is the great reversal. While our physical presence in the solar system is negligible, our capacity to perceive it is everything. The fact that a creature made of water and carbon, living on a third rock from the sun, can reach out with a telescope and sense the ghost of a world 10,000 astronomical units away is the real anomaly. We are small enough to be crushed by a single asteroid, yet we are vast enough in our minds to hold the entire architecture of the solar system within a single realization. We do not just live inside the universe. We are the way the universe looks back at itself. When we search for Planet 9, we are not just looking for a planet or a black hole. We are exercising the only power that truly matters in the vacuum, the ability to witness. The cold, dark reaches of the Kuiper Belt remain a mystery until a conscious mind asks why. The orbits are aligned. Until we noticed the pattern was meaningless. The scale of space is intended to make us feel powerless, but it actually grants us a unique kind of dignity. We are the observers. We are the ones who name the stars and measure the distance to Sedna. We are the only ones who can feel the tension of a discovery that has been waiting for billions of years to be found. The vastness does not erase us, it defines us. It gives our curiosity a purpose. If we find this hidden world, it will not be because the planet wanted to be seen. It will be because we refuse to accept the silence. We have built lenses and sensors and mathematical models to act as extensions of our own eyes, pushing our awareness into regions where no human heart could ever beat. Our consciousness has become a bridge across the emptiness, connecting the warmth of Earth to the frozen edge of everything. There is a profound peace in realizing that we are not the center of the system, but rather its witnesses. We are like children standing on the shore of an infinite ocean, noticing a ripple in the water far out at sea, and knowing with absolute certainty that something massive is moving beneath the surface. The thrill is not in the size of what we find, but in the fact that we can find it at all. We have spent so long fearing the void, treating the darkness as a place of loss or ending, but the search for Planet 9 teaches us that the darkness is actually a canvas. It is a space where secrets are kept safe until we are ready to understand them. The emptiness is not an absence. It is a presence waiting to be mapped. As we drift further into this realization, the boundary between our smallness and the cosmic scale begins to blur. We realize that the same laws of gravity pulling on a hidden giant at the edge of the system are the same laws that hold us to the ground beneath our feet. We are made of the same stardust as the frozen nitrogen ice of a distant world. We are woven into the same fabric of space-time, connected by invisible threads of force that span billions of kilometers. The insignificance we felt at the beginning is replaced by a sense of belonging. We are not strangers in a cold universe. We are its eyes. We are the consciousness of the solar system, waking up to realize how large our home actually is. The more we discover about the hidden architecture around us, the more we understand that being small is what allows us to see the big picture. Now, as the search continues and the Vera Rubin Observatory prepares to scan the southern sky, we can let go of the need to control or fully comprehend the scale. We can stop fighting the feeling of being dwarfed by the dark and instead lean into it. There is a liberation in surrender, a quiet joy in knowing that there are still rooms in our house that remain undiscovered. We leave behind the noise of the world, the heat of the cities, and the frantic pace of human time. We move past the planets we know, past the borders we drew, and out into the velvet night where the sun is only a distant spark. We let the scale wash over us until the distance no longer feels like a barrier, but like a blanket. We drift now toward that final boundary, where the math ends and the mystery begins, sliding slowly into the deep, welcoming silence of the void. Hear the silence of the edge where the wind never blows. Hear the silence of a world that has forgotten the warmth of a yellow sun. Hear the silence of the mathematics that promised us a ghost, waiting in the velvet dark for our eyes to finally find it. We are small enough to be held by the night, yet wide enough to hold the entire solar system within our thoughts. We drift now into the quietest part of the map, where the distance is no longer a void but a sanctuary. Let the darkness settle. Let the scale fade into peace. Let us be the generation that was humble enough to listen to the silence. Thank you. Sleep well tonight.